for you, a quilting tutorial. So let's just make sure that the technology stuff is working. If you can see me and hear me, let me know where you are tuning in from in the comments or the chat below, depending if you're watching us on YouTube or on the Crafty Gemini Facebook page. We should see the comments coming through on both. All right, awesome. We have friends tuning in from Florida, from Wisconsin, Becky in the house from Central Illinois, Kathy from Central Illinois, Nancy from Massachusetts. Okay, great. Well, awesome. Hi, Marilyn. She's tuning in from Melbourne, Florida, and she says, I'm always glad for an FPP refresher. So whenever you see those letters FPP, they stand for foundation paper piecing. Now, I feel like back when I started quilting 15, 16, 17 years ago, woo, getting older, we used to just call it paper piecing. But with like the uprising of English paper piecing, then I feel like a lot of people that didn't know the difference between the two started to make sure that they either put the word English in front of English paper piecing, because that's a different technique than what I'll be showing you here today. So foundation paper piecing features some type of a foundation. Now there are lots of different ways to do it, but the way that I'm going to show you here is basically like the basic. We're using a newsprint foundation. We are actually stitching on the foundation paper. There's also a freezer paper technique where you don't actually stitch through the paper, but that's for a different thing. For today, we are going to be making this little ray kite block, and I will show y'all like this. This is a little mini quilt that I'm almost done with because I am getting ready to launch my new Crafty Gemini online quilt club. Those of you that have been following me for a long time probably know that I've been doing online quilt clubs for years, since 2015, 2014, I think we launched the first one. Well, the next one is going to be all about foundation paper piecing. So today I'm just going to do a quick demo, share with you some of my tips as I go through, but there is a lot that goes into foundation paper piecing, several different techniques, tips, tricks, things to keep in mind, how to figure out how big to cut your pieces so that when you do stitch it on and then flip it to expose the pretty side of the fabric, you want to make sure it covers the full area that it needs to. So if you've ever had trouble with foundation paper piecing, definitely keep watching this demo. Hopefully you'll pick up some tips. And then if you want to join that online quilt club that will be all about mini quilts with foundation paper piecing techniques, make sure that you are signed up for our email newsletter list, because when we open the club in the next coming days, it will be a limited time only, like I always do with my clubs. It'll be at a discounted price, and then when we close the doors, we close the doors. So this little ray kite mini quilt is one of the projects that we'll be making in the quilt club. There's going to be a lot of different mini quilts. I always get a great response whenever I share my mini quilt walls that I have here in my studio. And so if that's something that you've been wanting to work on, kind of learn new techniques, make little cute mini quilts that you can decorate. Even if you don't have a full sewing room, you can put it, decorate the walls in your little sewing corner, in a hallway, in a bedroom, anything. They work great, and they're great practice for learning new techniques. Okay, awesome. Alex says, woohoo, another club. I'm here for it. I'm glad you are, girl. All right, so let's go ahead and give them the over-the-shoulder shot so they can see my workspace here, and let's start talking a little bit about this block. So this is my ray kite block. The finished block is going to finish at 6 inches, meaning when it's inside the full mini quilt, like this. Like once the binding is sewn to the side, to the edges here and all that, each block measures finish 6. 6, 6, 6. So that means that if we put 4 of these little blocks together, we end up with a mini quilt that is 12 inches square. And look how fun that is. I was really feeling this kind of monochromatic vibe, picking from my different scrappy fabrics, and I think it looks super cute like that. Can you imagine a whole quilt or even a pillow cover? This is going to be so, so cute. So this is the foundation, all right? As you can see, you can probably see on camera that the paper is not white because I didn't print it on regular printer paper. I printed the PDF template for this block on newsprint. And the reason for that is that it is lighter, meaning since we are going to be doing the typical foundation paper piecing technique for this demo, we are actually stitching on the black lines, okay? So wherever you see a line here that's separating these individually labeled areas, if we look, this is A1, this one says A2, A3. Now typically you'll either see just numbers or letters and numbers or even just letters, and it means that you based on how the designer created the block, you want to add the pieces of fabric for the different patchwork areas in that order, okay? When it's something like this, pretty symmetrical, it doesn't matter too much if I start following the exact path, but that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're basically going to piece the 4 pieces that make up this 1/2 of this block, and then we'll come back in and do a 5, a 6, a 7, and a 8. So you can see that to make this block, it features 8 total patchwork pieces, all right? And I printed it with this color so that you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is kind of cool to see because you kind of have like 2 lights, 2 darks. So you can take that as inspiration for how you want to select the fabrics that we're gonna put behind these pieces. And then you'll see that a 3, a 4, and a 7, and a 8 are our background pieces. So if we grab one of the ones that I have here in the mini quilt, I chose white for the background, but this would look amazing with like a dark background and lighter fabrics here. Just go the opposite with the contrast, okay? So here we have pinks, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can see I kind of did like how it printed out. So like alternating 2 darks and then in between 2 lighter prints, okay? Same thing, you can even go 2 solids and then every other put in a print. You know, depends on how little or how much fabric scrap baskets or bins you have, okay? So this is kind of more of a darkish olive green with a little bit of more of a neon color here. So I did like 2 olives alternating and then the lighter, brighter greens here. I think it looks super cute with that whole monochromatic look, okay? Anyway, let's get started because as I gave you the overview of this, let's talk a little bit more about the lines if you're new to foundation paper piecing. The solid lines mean lines that we sew on, at least in my templates. The dashed line means lines that we cut on. So the cut line here, you can probably tell it's 1/4 of an inch away from this line, and that is just accounting for the seam allowance of the individual block so that then you have room to sew it to something, right? Another block, borders, whatever it may be. All right, let me stop real quick. Let's see. Lori's asking, is your quilting club for beginners? So foundation paper piecing is beginner friendly if you follow the steps to learn the basic techniques. So I would say for you, Lori, if you're interested in signing up for this quilt club when we release it in the next coming days, watch this whole demo and see if it kind of makes sense to you a little bit, and then you can decide from there. One thing that I will say is that in my quilt clubs, I typically will start off easier and build. So because we're going to be working on multiple different mini quilt projects, we will start off with blocks that feature less pieces. Okay, so that you can practice the techniques that I'll be showing you. We'll be going over 3 different foundation paper piecing techniques, and that way you're not just stuck on one that might not make sense to you. I will highly encourage all my students to try all of the 3 different ones, and you may find that you like one way more than the other, okay? So they all, I would say, have their pros and cons, from stitching on the actual foundation like newsprint to doing the freezer paper method, and we'll go over all that in the actual quilt club lessons, okay? So here I have one because right now it kind of is like, you know, and if you're watching my videos and you know my stuff, you know that I am all about the visual students and visual learners. So here I have one that's almost done, and it was using the exact same fabrics that I'm going to use for the next demo in a second, but the same template, all right? The only thing is that this is the back. When we look at the foundation itself where we see the lines, you're building the block upside down. So the fabric is here, and I'll show you by flipping this one over. You see how this is identical? Let me scoot over a little bit. There. So I use the exact same foundation, okay? But I don't put the fabric on top of the foundation. It goes under, pretty side facing out. So these are some of the things that you kind of have to keep in the back of your mind of how this is built up. There's a lot of like, you know when you first learn how to drive and you hit reverse? And you start turning this way, you're like, oh, no, if I want to go that way, I need to turn it the opposite way. It's kind of like that same thing. You have to think about building the quilt block behind the foundations. Now, if you want a slow or step-by-step tutorial, I have one. And surprisingly, it's, I think, 11 or 12 years old. It's one of my first video tutorials I posted on my YouTube channel. And if you type in foundation paper piecing or paper piecing tutorial in YouTube, it's the first video that pops up. So it has over like over 500,000 views. And I get messages all the time from people that are like, I always go back to your tutorial. I will preface it by letting you know that it's an old video, the lighting is garbage, but the content is there. Okay, so that's just one way to do it. So we do have a link for that in the description box below, and we'll go ahead and put the link to that tutorial in the quilt chat or in the chat box below. Renee's asking, are the videos available for the Quilt Club members for a limited time to review? So when I release my Quilt Clubs, as the lessons are dripped out and we work on each project, the content and access to the content by any paid students, like students who paid to get in and access it, it never expires. So it's like any of my online courses or clubs. Once you pay, you get access to everything indefinitely. All right, so let's go ahead and trim this one up, because this is one of the most satisfying things to do in quilting, especially in paper piecing. So you can see that I have fabric that's sticking out beyond the template. Remember I said that the dashed line around here is our cut line. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to place it on the dashed line. I'm going to hold it steady, and I'm trimming up the block. Just like you would trim up any other quilt block that you need to kind of clean up and square up, we use the foundation for that step. So this, because I'm cutting on the dashed line, is leaving me the 1/4 of an inch extra that I need for my seam allowance, okay? Oh, I love this. This is like my favorite. One of my favorite things to do is trim away all the jagged edges, and then the big reveal when you flip it over and you see your cute block. And we'll talk about some common mistakes too that beginners, especially, not only beginners, because it happens to me sometimes, when I'm working on a foundation paper piecing project. Okay, so there's the cut template. That is the block. So crisp, so perfect. Okay, and then what you would do if you made your block using this method is that you would go in and peel off the paper. Now there's several ways to do it. Some people prefer to piece the entire quilt together, like however many blocks they are going to make for their full project, whether it's 4 or 24, say you're making a quilt, okay, a bigger quilt. And then after they piece all the blocks together, then they'll go in and kind of just sit down, watch TV, and peel off all the paper. I'm going to leave it like that for now, but I just want you to see what the finished block will look like. Isn't that super cute in different blues? Again, I did like a darker print and then slightly lighter ones here. And just using scraps, okay? So let's get started. You get your foundation. And of course, for my online quilt club, when we release it, you're going to have access to all the PDF templates. So you will need to print these out, whether you decide to follow the techniques that I'll teach you in the club for freezer paper method or the foundation one on newsprint. If you have access to even thinner paper than newsprint, that would be good. Whatever thin paper you can run through your printer, you know, so it helps if it comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets or A4, depending on where you live. Because the thinner the paper, the easier it will be to rip it off if you're going to go with that method. Remember, there's several different ways to do it. Let's see. Mom Doremi's asking, where do you get the designs to print out? So typically, if you're tackling a foundation paper piece project, you will get the templates from the designer. There's free patterns that you can download online. I have a little free one that's a little bit simpler than this block that goes along with that free step-by-step tutorial that I have on my YouTube channel. So if you type in paper piecing tutorial on YouTube, you'll see the video. In the video description box of that specific tutorial, you'll see the link on where you can go to my blog and download that print. So that would be a good way for you to kind of try it out at first and see. Okay. Tamara says she loves the precision. Yes, girl, don't we? Look at those points. It's just so crisp. And you can see that it's exactly 1/4 of an inch from the top edge. So whatever I sew to the top here will not cut off the little point that we have where those center 2 patchwork pieces meet. It will match up perfectly. And that's one of the main reasons so many of us quilters really love foundation paper piecing, because you don't have to be accurate. All you have, like in matching things up and aligning the seam allowances, all you need to do is be accurate in stitching directly on the guidelines that the foundation is providing for you, okay? So there'll be patterns, you know, if you buy a pattern, you can go on different designers' websites, on Etsy, you will buy the PDF patterns, and then you would print them from there to get the foundation. And then just keep in mind that you'll need as many sheets for however many blocks you need, okay? Some blocks, if they're bigger, will require 10 to 12 pages, and you'll have to like put together all the different components. But for this one, it's a pretty simple block. It has 8 pieces, which is kind of a little bit more than I would do for a beginner, but I did want to show y'all one of the little minis that we'll be making in the next quilt club. Okay, so now we're going to start with A1. For the first one, and so here's something. I have all my pieces already pre-cut. This is basically a way that I have come up with over the years, because I hate to be working on foundation paper piece blocks, and I get halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, and then I piece one more piece, and when I press it out, it's too short. Meaning I have to redo it. You have to redo the template, because by the time you go in and rip out the stitches, you're also ripping the paper. So you've ruined that foundation if you're doing this technique, okay? And then I have to make the block over again, and all the work that you did until then is wasted. So let me show you an example of that. Let me know in the chat box if this has ever happened to you. This guy, it's a whole block. It's almost perfect, except that this piece, this background piece that got inserted here, was too short. So can I save this? Probably not, because I'm looking at it here, and the distance that this is short as it slants in here is more than my 1/4 of an inch seam allowance that would be sewn right here. So unless this was going to be like off to the edge or something, and I was going to wing it and do like 3/8 of an inch, it would still be cutting it close. You'd have to do like a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance to go further in here and catch that, like catch enough of the fabric here without it messing up. So if you've ever tried foundation paper piecing, oh, you see, Jan says, yep. Dawn says, oh, yes. Margie says, oh, yes. This is one of the most common errors. And this is, I feel like, a reason why a lot of people try it. And they're like, yeah, it's kind of hit or miss, you know, especially if you have to make multiple blocks. They mess up on 1 or 2, and then you're like, oh my gosh, these are wasted. Now I have to make more blocks. So I do something that allows me to avoid this. And that's what I'll be teaching you on the Quilt Club as well. And that is, I provide you as a designer, I give you the exact measurements that I want you to cut your fabric pieces to. And I show you how to lay them correctly so that you never, I mean, it really is like, it's short. It's horrible. This is the worst when it happens, especially when everything else is well, like works out great, you know? So let's start with this guy. So anyways, I've pre-cut these to the size that I need. 1, 2, 3, 4. Where's the other blue? There it is. So we have 4 blues and we have 4 white chunks that will be for my background. So remember I said you're going to look at your template and see if it's labeled 1. In this case, it's A1. I'm going to take a glue stick, and this you're barely going to use any, so you can even use like a regular school glue stick. I'm going to flip it over. Remember I said we're building the block behind the foundation. All right. So A1 for me is here. This big one. And I'm just going to do a dot and a dot. That's it. Barely anything. You basically just want it to hold the first piece in place for you. And I'm going to use this one. So now, because I can kind of see through the newsprint, y'all can't see it, but you see how you see the lines? You can see that on the table. And that's another key thing about using a light, kind of really thin light paper in this case. And I'm going to place this on top. Now, sometimes the patterns will just include the foundations, and then you have to figure it out, like how big does your piece have to be? I don't do that because I do not want people wasting their time, energy, and their fabric. I teach, you know, with the measurements so that you know exactly what you need to do so you don't run into that, okay? Now I'm just hitting it with my little mini iron on my little Martelli mat. And now I'm going to flip it back, so that should be stuck there, even if it's just temporarily, okay? And I'm looking for where number 2 is. So number 2 is here, A2, to the left of this one. So I know that I'm going to sew the piece that I just placed to another one here. All right. So let's see. I'm going to grab this piece. That's going to be for A2. But first, I want you to prep this line between A1 and A2. Okay, forget about everything else. We have 2 pieces of fabric. That's how we start sewing. Okay, A1 and A2. This line is the line between them. So I'm right-handed, so I'm going to flip this over. Then we're going to come in here. I have a little postcard, okay? And I'm going to align this stiffer edge right on that line that I just mentioned between A1 and A2, okay? Let me scoot over a little bit. So A1, A2 line. I'm going to place it right on the line, and I'm going to flip the foundation back, and I'm finger creasing it. Now go ahead and go all the way. Even though that block stops here, I want you to crease it the full way, top and bottom to the edge of your foundation, okay? That's going to make things easier. Then I remove the little postcard and I flip it back. That fold and that black line, remember I said we're stitching on the lines. That line represents where I need to stitch, okay? But you know that we use 1/4 inch seam allowances in quilting. So I want to get rid of the waste here, the extra fabric, and only leave what I need for my seam allowance. Okay, so enter a must-have tool for foundation paper piecing. These are called add-a-quarter rulers, and traditionally we had these for years and years and years. It's just like a little ruler. This is a 6-inch one, and in this clear area here, it's like a little flange. There's a little lip to it. I'm going to zoom into this real quick so you can see. This is the ruler flat, and right here, it's raised. Can you see how that is raised there? So that creates a little lip that you're going to drape over the fabric and the paper fold here. All right, so after we have folded it back, I'm going to place that flange on the paper, and you see how it won't go past, it doesn't slide, because the little lip I just showed you on the ruler grabs the raised paper because it's folded back. Okay? And what that's doing is allowing exactly 1/4 of an inch from this fold out here, and then we use it like we would any other quilting ruler, use our rotary cutter, and trim away the excess. Okay? So I have exactly 1/4 of an inch of fabric here. Now that allows me to easily grab, what's the next piece? A2 it's going to get sewn there, and align it with that one. So this is a straight edge that needs to be sewn. So let's have a quick look. If I flip this back, remember, the pretty side of the fabric is facing up. That's one of the most important things you need to remember with paper piecing, okay? So now, when I'm at this step, I have the piece I need to sew. I trimmed it to the seam allowance. I need to forget about everything else and go back to sewing and quilting basics. When we want to sew 2 pieces of fabric together, we have to position them what? Pretty sides touching, right? Y'all have heard me say that thousands of times over the years. So if that's the pretty side of this fabric, I'm placing it pretty side face down onto pretty side of the next fabric piece. And because that little lip that I use on the add-a-quarter ruler gave me 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, I can take my fabric piece A2 and position it exactly. So like we would sew anything else, put the raw edges together, pretty sides touching, and sew 1/4 of an inch. You know how to do that, right? So let's grab our sewing machine. Now, I like to work with smaller blocks when I'm starting off, especially with beginners, because look, I can hold the whole thing in my hand. Okay? I can hold it on one end and the other with nothing moving on me. So I'm going to position this under here. I didn't move my needle to like 1/4 of an inch. I don't have a 1/4 inch presser foot on or nothing. I have the needle, whoops, let me move my foot pedal, in the center position. And the reason for that is because I'm using a foundation. I'm going to stitch right on the black line that I see. But first, I'm going to align it, put my presser foot down, sink my needle in the fabric, okay? And then I'm going to adjust the stitch length here. If you're doing the paper method, traditionally we like to just shorten the stitch length. What that's going to do is going to give you smaller, tighter stitches that are going to perforate the paper better, which after you're done making the block is going to be easier for you to peel the paper, the foundation paper off, okay? So that's usually what you see. But once I have that, well, let me put the presser foot back up because I want to flip this paper back and I don't want to bend it up or rip it too much. Okay, so I'm there. Remember where we're stitching, between A1 and A2. So I'm not going to start that far out. I'm going to bring this down and I'm starting like a stitch or two beyond the black line. There, I'll bring the needle down and then hold everything in place. Do not move anything and stitch directly on that line. The lines will take longer to stitch because you're using a shorter stitch length. I set mine to 1.5. Some people go shorter, some people do 1.8. I find that 1.5 works good for me because if I leave like say 2mm stitch length, I'm so rough at yanking the paper that oftentimes I'll rip the stitches and you don't want to do that. Oh my goodness. I had just wound a bobbin before I started, but I don't think I put it in right. It looks like it slipped out of the guide, so give me a second. There. Whoop. Pressing buttons. set up everything here for the next stitch, the next seam. Okay. All right, let me move these in a little bit more. Now, ideally, I can crank through these blocks really quickly if I'm using one of my fancier machines that have automatic thread cutter. Hello. If you don't and you're using a basic one, a basic machine like this, it's just keep some thread snips handy because you're going to be cutting a lot of beginning and ending stitches, okay? So now I'm going to the pressing mat and grabbing my iron, and you want to press all the way out. You don't want any fabric bubbling here because remember, the lines on the foundation are what we're stitching on. So if your fabric is bubbled up like this, and from the back side, I go ahead and stitch the next one in, there's no way to smooth that bubbling out. Okay, if you don't smooth it before you sew, you can catch puckers and pleats and all kinds of messes in there. Okay, so smooth it all the way out. So that's one. Okay, we're going through the next steps. Let me stop real quick and see if I have questions. Marion's asking, do I have more information about the Quilt Club? We'll be sending out all the information in the coming days via email. Email newsletter is the best way to stay in touch because that way we can give you all the information, include the links. So if you're not already signed up for our free email newsletter, make sure that you go to CraftyGemini.com and you'll see a pop-up. You can enter your name and email address on there, and just be checking your spam too, because if you're joining the list new, some email service providers will send my emails to spam and you don't want that, okay? Yes, Della, hey, you just hopped on. You see that I'm doing FPP. Possible new club, she asks. Yes, new club coming soon. We're going to be working on several mini quilts that are all featuring foundation paper piecing so that I can teach all the different techniques, okay? All right, so we have A1, A2, and the line was stitched right here. So now the next one in line is A3, and if I look, A3 is a background chunk. So I need to grab one of my background chunks. And let's go ahead and grab this one. Okay, so remember, first we look at the line in between the one we just sewed and the next one over. A2 and A3 is where I'm looking at. So remember, you put something a little bit stiff, not regular paper. I use like a little postcard. This is one of the cards that we included in our bag maker subscription box, just so that it gives you a little bit of a stiff edge that you can fold against, okay? So I fold on the line, I keep it folded back, and I use my add a quarter ruler. Now we do have these in stock in a few different variations and sizes. Real quick, this is the regular 6-inch add a quarter, and then they came out with a 6-inch add a quarter plus, which is the same size, has the same flange, but instead of using basically the combo that I just did of like a little postcard and the add a quarter regular one, you can just use this one because the other edge is a tapered edge that's thin like a little card. So you can, flip it to this side, the tapered edge, finger crease it here, then remove it, then go with the flange side, the little lip part here, and then cut it. So it's either like this combo, and you can use any little postcard that you get in the mail, spam stuff. I just save them because you can use them like that. Or this one that has both a tapered edge and the flange on that side. And we have them in our online shop. Remember, you can buy, we have hundreds of products for sale there at craftygemini.com/shop. And the link is in the chat and in the description box below. Yes, Barb says the add a quarter plus has the flat end to help her make the creases. Absolutely. And actually, I'm not using this one here because my blocks are kind of small. But if you're working on larger paper pieced blocks, this is the same. This is the add a quarter plus, but in 12-inch. So same idea. You can use it like that, and then do the flange. It just comes in 2 different lengths there, or at least the ones that we carry. Okay. So I've trimmed it there. Now I know I need to add A3. So I'm going to flip this back. I'm going to position this one here. Matching raw edges. And remember, pretty sides touching. So if you're starting off and you're new, and you'll hear me say this if you end up joining the club, working with solid fabrics is going to be awesome because that way you don't have to worry so much about pretty side or wrong side of the fabric, and you can just get the techniques down and then go into working with fabrics that have prints, a right side and a wrong side and all that stuff. But usually when you're learning a new technique that requires quite a bit of brain power, it's good to remove one of those one of those things that could cause you trouble, especially until you learn that technique. Okay, so we're back here. Let's do it again. So that would have been pretty side to pretty side, so that now when I go like this, I can tug on this and press away from the patchwork. And this is what I mean by we are building the block on the back of the foundation. Now I have a free tutorial on my YouTube channel where I go into this, because when I first started, and I had been quilting already for a bit, and I wanted to learn foundation paper piecing. Every magazine that I had, that I subscribed to, that had like inserts in it on like foundation paper piecing, text instructions with like 2 images, I was like, there's no way, I don't understand it. It didn't click. So for that tutorial, I remember locking myself in my sewing room. I told my husband, here's the baby. My son was a newborn at the time. And I was like, I need to figure this out. So I would just keep sewing, flipping. Nope, it's wrong. Sewing, flipping. Nope, that's wrong. Nope, nope, nope. Until I figured it out. And then I made that tutorial to break it down. So if it doesn't make sense in your mind, definitely look up my paper piecing tutorial on YouTube, and that will help. Okay. Okay, Susan, I see you're asking what's the difference between the 6-inch ruler and the 6-inch plus at a quarter. I hope that I already went over that here. That one has a tapered edge and the other one doesn't. Okay. I missed the question here. Somebody's asking about the subscription club. Oh, Valerie was asking, is this quilt club starting before the June to August bag maker subscription? No. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap, okay? Because one is for bag making, the other one's for quilting. But it's only the bag maker subscription box, by the way. I'm closing it on Friday, so if y'all want to look that up, the link is in the description box below. We make 3 mystery projects in 3 months, 1 each month. These projects, because they're mini quilts, are not going to take quite as long. So you could easily do both, or you could just do one or the other, if you're both a quilter and a bag maker like me. Okay, so now A1, A2, A3 has been added. Next in line is number 4. And that is up here. It's another background piece, okay? So same thing. Let's go ahead and use the add a quarter plus so y'all can see it from the beginning using the tapered edge here. And we do carry these rulers in our shop. We don't have many of the plus ones, but we do have a lot left of the regular ones, which is fine. I've been using this for years and years. All right, so I'm placing the tapered edge of the add a quarter plus on the line between A3 and A4. Don't get confused with the other pieces. Go in order. So we just added the white background that will cover the area for A3, and next in line is 4. And they do meet here, okay? Don't worry about A2 and A1. Just still look for the line that connects the numbers in order. So it's this one. So I'm folding it back. And I tend to be really rough. I need to be a little bit softer because it's newsprint. I could easily rip right through this. So if you're like me, just use your fingernail to crease that there. Then I'll remove the ruler and I'll go in and crease it a little bit better without the bulk of the ruler under there. Okay. Then, since we're using this one, let's do it. I place the lip right on the edge to give myself that 1/4 inch seam allowance, and anything beyond it just gets hacked away. Okay. Like that. So now this is A4 and it's a background piece. So let's grab a white chunk because that is the background piece. And I'm going to, again, pretty side on top of what would be a pretty side. On the white doesn't matter, but it is the pretty side of the fabric, let's say. And I'm lining up raw edges. Let's grab our sewing machine and we're going to position everything and stitch right on the line. And I always start and stop a stitch or 2 away, like before the line and after, into the seam allowance just a little. Just in case you do yank the paper a little bit too hard, if the first couple stitches come out, you'll still have more stitches in place before you get to the join of wherever the next piece is going to get sewn to that, okay? So look at that. We're done with half this block already, okay? Flip it. You can press it just like we do most of our patchwork, right? Press it just as it was sewn, then flip it back to expose the pretty side. And I'm tugging on this, pull it away so you don't have any bubbling in your seams, okay? And I love the way that it looks like sloppy. There's all these angles, different things. And then you saw how I did at the beginning where we trim it up and it's just like crispy and it looks so good. All right, so that is half the block, okay? Now let's continue following our numbers. So we flip this. We did a 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're ready for a 5. So yes, a 5 doesn't connect to a 4, but if I'm following in line with the numbers, I know that if I have to sew a 5, it's going to go to a 1, right? Because that was the first piece that we started with. And when we flip this back, on the line between a 1, which was sewn as the first piece, and a 5, which needs to be next, we know that they're just going to meet right there down that center vertical seam. And it really is just a matter of going through these steps. Now, of course, I started off with my pre-cut pieces. In the Quilt Club, I will be going over how I come up with the amount so that you know, and I give you the full list for every block, what size you need to cut the different pieces for. Some of the new things that we're going to be including too, if you joined our Clammy Quilt Club that we did last year that focused all on curves, is some coloring pages. So they're going to be like black and white printouts so that if you do have stashed fabric, you can kind of color in to get an idea visually of what your blocks would look like if you did something like I did with like the monochromatic colors, or maybe you wanted to do rainbow ones, or just, you know, kind of audition different colors and shades next to each other before you start hacking your fabric and sewing it in, okay? So that's going to be some of the printables. We have tips printouts, we have all the math and all the stuff, designs, all the templates and everything for you. And that's going to be in the Quilt Club. Again, if you're just tuning in new, we are launching a new foundation paper piecing online quilt club in the coming days. The best way to find out is to be on our email list. And that way you can get in, because we only open the doors, the virtual doors, for a limited time. Okay? So I'm stitching on the line. Remember, again, I have my stitch length here set to 1.5 because I'm doing a paper piecing technique that it features me stitching through the actual paper. And the paper I'm using here is newsprint, which I bought a pack, 8.5 by 11 size sheets that I can run through my printer to print my templates. And you can do that with all of them, okay? Again, I press, press, press. And you can see I'm not running into any issues of my fabric pieces being too short, okay? Because I calculated all the math. I've had some patterns before where, you know, you buy a pattern, foundation paper piece, and I always love when they do include measurements to cut, but sometimes I get the measurement and it's so close that, like, if you shift it 1/8 of an inch one way, you're going to be short. So it's like, why do that? You know, why not a lot for more so that you know a beginner will have more successful results quicker? And that's what I do, at least with my designs. Okay, is I give you a big enough chunk, so you will have some waste because this is all about precision, and because of the different angles, you're going to be using different chunks of the fabric. Now, a quick tip that I'll share with you here that I didn't mention early on, it's some of the stuff of, you know, how I like to teach is sharing tips and the why of things. One of the things I do, because you can see, because we have angles here, some of you that are garment sewists perhaps may be wondering, what about the fabric grain line? If you're turning it like this, aren't these edges going to be cut on the bias? Does that cause a problem? Does it not? Okay, one of the things that I do to remedy that, again, to remove one of the potential things that would drive you nuts, especially if you just, you know, are trying to learn the technique, is to starch your fabric. Starching the fabric really, like before you cut it down to size, really helps stabilize it a little bit more so that I can forget about the grain line, okay, until everything is pieced together. And the grain line's not going to matter too much unless you're really manipulating the outer edges of your individual blocks. If you're making them, leaving the foundations on, this is kind of stabilizing everything. You can sew all your blocks together, then rip off the paper, and everything is stabilized because it's already sewn together. Okay, so one of the tips that I have for that is to start your fabric so that you kind of stabilize all the angles of it, and then you don't have to worry too much about, you know, washed fabric that's like really pliable and soft and having biased edges on the exterior exposed, okay? Hi Prudence, she says, I just got here. Does the new club start soon? It does. We're going to be sending out emails probably late this weekend or Monday. So just be on the lookout for in the next couple days. Make sure that you are on our email list. Okay? If you've ever unsubscribed yourself from my email list, you're not going to get the email. I get that a lot. And then we go back and check, and then it's like, whoa, you unsubscribed months ago, you know? So you either have to resubscribe yourself or just add yourself on now if you're not on our email list to make sure that you get the info. All right? And we'll try to share it on on Facebook and Instagram too, in case you don't catch the emails, but be on the lookout. All right, so I put the next fabric piece there. Remember, pretty sides touching. That's what you want to remember every time you put another piece of fabric in there. Scoot this guy over. And again, once I put that presser foot down, like right here, there's no pins. I don't have to do anything. It's a small enough block that when I positioned it, everything was aligned. When I sink the needle down into the project, a couple stitch lengths before the black line starts, and the presser foot is down, it's holding everything in place. I just don't want anything to shift. So I'm just gonna hold it steady here, and my needle is in the center position, y'all. And one of the things is, instead of getting under and holding it up, raised, press everything down against the bed of the machine. That will also help steady everything and keep things from moving on you. And I find that that's a more accurate way to keep things steady than lifting it up and just trying to hold your fingers, because then you have room under that area between the presser foot and here where things can move on you, and we don't want that. Okay, but yeah, we're gonna be making some fun mini quilts. Y'all want to see a sneak peek? Look at this cute one. Ah, it's a little bumblebee. Look how cute. Okay, enough. Anyways, those are a couple of the blocks that we're gonna be working on in the new mini quilt club. And y'all, if you have scraps, I'm just gonna say, this mini quilt measures 5 by 7. What? How cute would this be in a bathroom? Like, oh, you know, we're beekeepers, so obsessed. And this is just a black and white. These are not even solids. These are prints that I had in my collection. This is like a spotted light blue. Let me show you. Because sometimes people think, well, I don't have the correct fabrics or colors for like a light blue sky. Look at that. It's not even a solid blue. It's just a blue that has white speckles on it, but it goes perfect for the sky. Okay, you got to think a little outside the box. I do have solid white here for the wings. This is a black and white print that I designed years ago with my Kinfolk fabric collection. That was all black and white that I designed for Timeless Treasures. Isn't that cute? I didn't have solid black, so I used the black with the little design from that collection. And then you can see that the yellow has some little kind of like dotted triangles on it. So it's not a true solid, but look how cute. Oh my gosh. Adorable. Anyways, that's one of the projects. So you can see that they're not going to be huge projects. You'll easily be able to get through the stuff when you join, you know, if you join the quilt club, and I'm walking you through every single step. Plus, if you're learning a technique with such few pieces to complete one block, I guarantee you once you make one, you're gonna be like, oh, that wasn't bad. But it'll also help kind of solidify the techniques. And there's several different small blocks. We have mini quilts of a couple different sizes. And that way you can get some good practice and try out the different techniques that I'm going to be showing you to do it. So we're going to do the foundation version, which is like how I'm showing y'all here. We're going to do the freezer paper method, and then we're going to do one more that I kind of like. So we'll share that in the quilt club. Thank you. And she says, Vanessa's the best teacher. Thank you so much. I try to think the way that I like to learn for my students. So if you're a visual learner, then you know you're in the right place. All right. So now we've added a 6. Let's go ahead and do, we only have 2 pieces left to add, and these are the background pieces. So a 7 and a 8. So this one is here. And now I need to do a 7. And you can see that if I wasn't talking, I can do one of these little blocks. This one probably 10 minutes. Once you have the fabrics pre-cut, you know what I'm saying? So I will be giving y'all the dimensions that I want you to cut the different fabrics to, so that you can just, boom, jump in and start piecing. See, this is why I like my postcard. Sometimes that tapered edge on the plus, because I can't press down against it too hard. Otherwise, I run the risk, because I'm rough with my hands, of ripping the paper. I tend to like to use this with the little guy. Just personal preference. All right, let's trim away the seam allowance, 1/4 inch. Let's add these 2 background pieces and give it a good press, because I do want to finish this block up so that y'all see me making it from beginning to end, using up one foundation, and give it another trim like we did with the one at the beginning of today's show. All right, so A6, we're done here. Background piece, and this is the bigger one, so let's go here. Pretty side to pretty side. Remember, you're building that block on the back side of the foundation, okay? Easy peasy. And now we talked about accuracy a little bit, precision quilt blocks, because we're stitching on the lines, even if one piece moves a little bit on you or whatever underneath, they're not exactly matching up, because we're stitching right on the line, it's going to look exactly like it's supposed to, because the fabric or the seam lines are then following the design of the foundation. So that's how we get that accuracy. Oh, thank you. Angie says, I can't wait for this new club. Jen says, I don't think there's anything Vanessa can't do. I get this question a lot. What can't you do? What can't you do? You know, because I have so many different interests, and I always respond the same way. I always say, I can't sing to save my life, but everything else I can learn. And it's so funny because then I always get people that can sing, and they'll be like, you can learn how to sing. And I'm like, nah. I tried. Nah. All right. A8, we're down to the last one. Let's go ahead and do this, this. And you can see another tip is to start off with these smaller blocks. They're easier to deal with, less stuff going on, less fabric in case you do mess up and waste some. And it just makes it be in kind of more manageable chunks, okay? Now you can see that because I haven't trimmed the block, I still have a lot of excess fabric sticking out on these background pieces. So even if you have just a little at a quarter, just go ahead and slide it. As long as it has the little flange, the lip thing edge on here, as long as it's grabbing some of it, it will stay nice and straight for you. So I can trim, you know, slide up a little bit, trim, keep sliding, sliding, sliding. So you don't have to get multiples for now, at least. If you're working on really large blocks, then it does come in handy to have that big 12-inch one. All right, and now let's add the last one. But you can see I can do this already with, I was going to say my eyes closed, but not really because I need to be seeing what I'm doing, but you know what I mean. I can pretty much do this already without thinking. And I have other paper piecing quilt-alongs, free tutorials that you can check out. In the new online quilt club, we're just going to be kind of diving in like a full master class of different techniques and my tips and tricks. I've taught paper piecing multiple times in person too, so I'll be going over, you know, what I've seen from students, where you can anticipate having or running into some issues and how to troubleshoot them so that you can go ahead and use your scraps and have successful results to make these cute minis. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. So there is the block. Susan says, how long does each project take? I have lots of gardening. Well, you know what, Susan? You should be good because I have to make multiples of them, film it, and teach it to y'all in the club. And I have lots of gardening to do too. I bet you there's going to be projects that you can make. I mean, I made 3 of these mini quilts in a day in like 4.5 hours. So like one like this, once you have the technique down, you can make this bumblebee in less than an hour, you know? Or if you really go slow and take your time, let's say 2 hours. And once you have the quilt tops done, you can do like I have here and just layer them up and have the little mini quilts ready to go. So you can decide if you want to quilt it on your machine, quilt it by hand, whatever you want to do. If you have a long arm, like me, what I'm thinking of doing with the second batch, like when I film the stuff with the projects, I may just load all my mini quilts on the frame, right? Like load a generic backing fabric, put the batting, and then just drop all my mini quilts on there so that I can quilt them all in the same pass instead of having individual quilt sandwiches like this. But there's so many different options to finish these guys up. But like if you make this one, you're going to want to finish it because you want to put this up on your wall. Look at that little bee. I need to do something for the little eye. So cute. Okay. Anyways, those are some of the projects. Now let's go ahead and trim this sucker up. We don't have any edges that are short. Do you see that? Because I did the math, I calculated the cuts, and that will be included for each of the projects that we'll be making in the new online quilt club, what you need to cut your fabrics to. So what I would recommend is like when you have a little bit of time, just cut your pieces, put in a little stack with the foundation, set it aside. Okay? Then come back in one day and sit, boom, boom, and then make it. Because I know a lot of people don't like cutting. Cutting, believe it or not, who else out there is with me, is my favorite step in the entire quilt making process is cutting. And I know I'm in the minority. There's some of you that do love it too. But I love to cut random size patchwork pieces. Something about keeping those numbers in my head. 2 3/4 by 5 7/8. If you don't like those measurements, no worries. So far, none of these projects have off numbers like that, like down to the 1/8. But they'll be like halves and stuff, you know, like 1.5 by 7. So you'll cut your pieces to size, and then you know that's exactly what you need to have a little bit more extra left over and still have enough to sew into the individual foundation sections and have enough that you can trim away. So that's the goal. You want to have extra so that when you trim it, you're trimming it, squaring it, everything the exact size it needs to be. And that's part of the precision. Ooh, look how cute. Isn't that cute? 2 identical blocks. I mean, not identical in the positioning of the fabrics, but you know what I mean. So if you repeat this and repeat this and repeat this and repeat this and make a bunch of them, you already know what you're going to get. Oh, isn't that cute? And remember, if we're doing this method where we're stitching through the paper, you do need 1 foundation per, okay, per block, because each one gets taken up. Then if you were going to take off the paper, because we use a stitch length of 1.5 millimeters in length, because I use newsprint, look. Those short stitch length, or the short straight stitches, perforated the tissue paper to the point where it's like literally nothing to pull this away, okay? Printer paper, it ain't gonna pull away this easily. I'm just letting you know. So I know some people will be like, well, I'll just use printer paper for now. Don't do it. You won't be happy. Is just a lot thicker. So now for these inside ones, I sometimes just scratch on the corner because I've removed that one and that one. These will just pull apart because there's nothing holding it together on the other side of the seam. So let's go from the thicker side down, pull, same thing here. And this is something that you can do, obviously, you know, sitting down, watching TV. It's quite satisfying, actually. As long as you're not fighting with the paper, it is fun to do. But you can see with the newsprint, it was just pulling it away, and we're not straining the stitches, because that's what will happen if you use like regular weight printer paper, is that when you're yanking on it, that paper is going to tug on those stitches and it's going to affect the tension, and sometimes you end up with rip stitches or loose stitches, and you don't want that. You're using the paper just as the foundation, okay? And then you can recycle your bits, okay? So that is how, that's at least one of the methods. I would say like this is like your cheapest mode of entry, most straightforward way to just jump in and do foundation paper piecing. There's, of course, other things that I'll be covering in the online quilt club. Alex is asking if I have the newsprint paper available in the shop. We don't, not yet at least. I am going to place an order for some of these other things, especially if we do sell out of some of the add-a-quarter rulers. So for those of you that are thinking of signing up for the new Foundation Paper Piecing Online Quilt Club, I'll have more information for you when we open up the doors for the Quilt Club, and that way we can make sure that everybody, you know, is getting the supplies that they need. I'm going to assume everybody has massive amounts of fabric stash or little scraps. If you have small chunks, I mean like pieces like this, save it. You can cut a bunch of different little pieces depending on which project you're using it for, but you can cut this up to make the different foundation segments on the different blocks, okay? Let's see. Oh, awesome, Prudence. She says, I love the last 2 quilt clubs. I've been looking forward to this one. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Can't wait to see your quilts, your mini quilts. Let's see. Let's see. Tamara says, I've been told that FPP is a process where you should not think, just do. I mean, kind of once you get it down, but you definitely need to think at the beginning. And that's how I try to break it down, is like stop and do one step at a time. Like forget about the foundation. Now think back to the sewing basics. We sew pretty sides touching. Because if you're thinking about the foundation, especially at that step, it's something about being used to looking at the fabric pretty side facing you, you know, that you're looking at the foundation with those same eyes, and you're thinking the foundation is the pretty side of the fabric. So oftentimes people will flip the fabric the other way, and you'll know it because as soon as you flip it over and you press it, you're like, oh, I put it on backwards, you know, and then it's wasted. But yeah, we go through all those different steps. Once you get it down, kind of like you saw me doing here, you can just grab the next piece, go, grab the next piece and go. And it's really, really fun, really fun. All right. Oh, great. Awesome. Marcy, I see you. She says, and Dorothy says, great inspiration. I'm glad. It's a lot of fun. Sometimes, like when you first are introduced to FPP, you look at it and you're like, oh, nah, that looks too difficult. But it's a way. It's kind of like an easier way to make more complex looking quilt blocks. And that is what I love about it. The crisp line, the crisp edges, and angles that I don't have to cut myself, right? I'm not sitting here with a ruler and looking at the rulers like, oh, the 30-degree angle, I need to cut this at that 30-degree angle or do anything. It's just like sewing by number. You know, like how you paint by number? It's like that. Grab a little chunk of fabric, boop, boop. But you just have to have the steps down, you know, in order to do it correctly. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I see a bunch of you are super excited to join the online quilt club. A quick recap, make sure that you are signed up for our online email newsletter list. That is the #1 way to find out when we open the doors in the coming days to join my new Crafty Gemini online quilt club, FPP edition, which is going to be all about foundation paper piecing and mini quilts. Whenever I do an online quilt club and that features a new technique, like last year we did the clammy, we made mini quilts because it's not as overwhelming as thinking, oh, there's no way I'm going to make a queen size quilt with a new technique, okay? So we're going to make some cute different things. I showed y'all a quick demo of this little ray kite block that we're going to be making. Here's the mini quilt that features 4 of them, 4 of the blocks sewn together, done in a kind of monochromatic vibe along the different blocks, okay? So yellows, some greens, blues and teals here, and some pinks, super cute. Think about these little minis that where you can put them like for decoration. I have a mini quilt wall that has some empty space up here, so I'm super excited to finish these up and get them up there. This is another one. This little block by itself is a mini quilt. Obviously it's not finished, but the block itself will finish 5 inches by 7 inches. This is a super cute, quick little gift. You can use it even as a mug rug if you're giving it as a gift to someone. If you have beekeepers in your life, hello, we love bees. This would be super cute to give somebody, right? To have in a bathroom, in a hallway. You can put these up on any wall, like a little decoration while you're practicing the techniques, all right, on how to put this together. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope to see y'all in the new online quilt club, and I'll be back over the next couple days, too. I'm going to be posting a couple more little tips and tricks videos for those of you that are thinking about maybe wanting to join the online quilt club, but still feel like foundation paper piecing is kind of out there. Not yet for you, but I'm gonna help y'all out, okay? Have a great rest of your week. I will see y'all in the next video, and thanks again for tuning in. Bye. I will see y'all in the next video, and thanks again for tuning in. Bye. I will see y'all in the next video, and thanks again for tuning in. Bye.